The Virgin tried to escape the auction block, until one cowboy's bid claimed her forever Wild West. Wooden buildings lined the main street, their faded signs swinging with the breeze. The air smelled of leather, horse sweat, and the faint tang of gunpowder from last week's saloon brawl. Among these buildings stood a small crowd gathering in front of a raised platform, the auction block. It was the kind of place that could make even the bravest men uneasy, and for a young woman like Clara, it filled her with a dread she had never known before. Clara had grown up in a modest cabin on the edge of the prairie with her parents and two younger siblings. Life had never been easy, but she had always felt safe under the wide sky, where the wind and the birds could offer a freedom no town could ever take away. That freedom seemed impossible now. Her family's farm had been struck by drought, their crops failing and debts piling up faster than they could pay. There had been rumors of a man in town who would pay handsomely for young women, and in a moment of despair, her parents had made a choice that haunted Clara even as she walked toward the auction block. Her heart thudded painfully against her chest as she climbed the wooden steps, her hands trembling slightly. The crowd was larger than she had expected. Farmers, cowboys, and even a few women with children on their hips stood pressed together, eyes trained on her. Some whispered cruelly, others merely watched with curiosity, but all seemed to regard her not as a person, but as an object, something to be bought, something to be measured and judged. Clara lowered her gaze, wishing she could disappear, wishing the earth would open beneath her feet. The auctioneer, a tall man with a booming voice and a sharp, calculating gaze, stepped forward. His coat was dusty but clean, and his hat sat at a perfect angle on his head. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, his voice carrying over the crowd, "today we have a very special offering, young, pure, and ready to be claimed. Who will give the first bid?" Clara's stomach twisted. She had heard words like this before, whispered in fear late at night when the adults thought she was asleep. She had hoped that those fears would remain stories, but now she stood in the harsh sunlight, facing them head-on. She clenched her fists, gripping the hem of her plain dress as if it could somehow protect her. Her mind raced. Escape. She had to find a way to escape. The first bid was shouted by a burly man near the front, his voice rough from years of hard work on the ranch. Clara's pulse quickened as the numbers grew. Each bid felt like a nail being hammered into a coffin. Her eyes flicked to the side, searching desperately for a way out. The streets beyond the auction block were crowded, but she knew there might be alleys, horse stalls, or even an open gate that could lead her to freedom. Every second counted. As the bids climbed, Clara began to plan. She noticed a barrel near the edge of the crowd, a stack of crates behind the saloon, and a narrow alley that led toward the back of the town. If she could just make it to one of these places, she might have a chance to disappear among the buildings, to melt into the shadows where no one could find her. Her mind was sharp with fear, her senses alive in a way they had never been before. A man in a wide-brimmed hat raised his hand, signaling a higher bid. Clara's chest tightened. Panic clawed at her throat, making it hard to breathe. The auctioneer's hammer hovered, ready to strike, and in that instant Clara made a decision. She would run. She didn't know if she would succeed, but she could not let herself be sold. Not today, not ever. She waited for the right moment, her ears straining to catch every sound. The crowd shouted, laughed, and shouted again, but Clara's focus narrowed to one thing: escape. When the auctioneer called out the latest bid, a sudden noise erupted from the edge of the town square, a horse breaking loose, galloping wildly and kicking up dust. Gasps and shouts filled the air, and in that instant Clara moved. She bolted, her skirts tangling around her legs as she sprinted toward the alley. The crowd screamed in surprise, some cheering, others cursing, but Clara did not care. Adrenaline surged through her veins, giving her speed she had never known she possessed. Her heart pounded and each breath burned in her lungs, but she did not slow. She darted past barrels, jumped over low fences, and wove between startled townspeople. The auctioneer bellowed, the hammer forgotten, as men shouted for her to stop. Clara's legs ached, but fear made her stronger. She could hear the footsteps of the town sheriffs behind her, their boots pounding on the wooden planks. They would not give up, not until she was back on the auction block. But she would not let them. She would not. Turning a corner sharply, Clara stumbled into a narrow alleyway. It was dark and smelled of hay and damp wood, but it offered some cover. She pressed herself against the wall, listening as the shouts grew fainter in the distance. For a moment she allowed herself to breathe, to feel that flicker of hope that she might actually get away. But the fear remained, gnawing at her like a persistent animal. She could not stay here. She had to keep moving. Her eyes scanned the alley. There were crates stacked against the walls, a few loose boards that could serve as a makeshift ladder, and a small gate at the end that might lead to the open plains. If she could just reach it, freedom would be hers. She gathered her courage and moved forward carefully, every step calculated, every sound analyzed. The town was alive with noise, but she felt invisible in the shadows, unseen by most, unnoticed by those who had so quickly tried to claim her. As she neared the gate, Clara's thoughts drifted briefly to her family. She loved them, but she could not understand why they had let this happen. The harsh realities of the Wild West were cruel, but she had never imagined being treated like property. Anger flared alongside her fear, and it strengthened her resolve. She would not be broken. She would not be claimed. Finally, she reached the gate. It was old and slightly ajar, and with a forceful push, it swung open. Beyond it stretched the golden fields of the prairie, endless and free. Clara paused, letting the sight fill her with hope and courage. She could run. She could disappear into the vastness where no one could follow. She could take back her life. But just as she stepped forward, a shadow fell across her path. A man appeared, mounted on a horse, his presence calm and commanding. Clara froze, unsure if this new figure was friend or foe. His eyes were steady, and though she could not read his intentions, there was something different about him, something that made her hesitate, something that made her wonder if, just maybe, he could help her. The chase was far from over, and Clara's journey had only just begun. Yet in that moment, as the wind whipped her hair and the prairie stretched endlessly before her, she felt the first true spark of hope she had known in weeks. She would not give up. She would find freedom. And whoever this man was, she knew that the next moments would change her life forever. Clara's heart raced as she stared at the shadowy figure blocking the gate. The man sat tall on a dark, powerful horse, his wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow over his eyes. For a moment she froze, unsure whether to flee or to speak. Every instinct in her body screamed that she should run, but the sheer calmness in the man's posture gave her pause. He wasn't shouting, waving, or reaching for a weapon. He simply observed her, waiting. Who are you?" Clara stammered, her voice trembling. She backed slightly, gripping the edge of the gate as if it could shield her. The wind carried the faint scent of leather and dust from his horse, and there was a strange steadiness in the way he breathed, a confidence that seemed impossible in a world so wild and unpredictable. "My name's Jeb," the man said finally, his voice low but clear. "I do mean you any harm. I just don't reckon the people from that town should be chasing you." He gestured back toward the distant streets, where faint shouts and the pounding of boots drifted on the wind. Clara noticed he spoke with authority, as though he had faced worse than this and survived. Clara's mind raced. Could she trust him? He had appeared out of nowhere at the exact moment she was about to escape. There was something almost too convenient about it, yet she felt a small spark of relief. She had been running blindly, panicked and exhausted, and now here was someone who seemed to understand the danger she faced. Before she could answer, the sound of boots on wooden planks grew closer. The town's sheriffs were still pursuing her, and though they had lost sight of her in the alley, they were methodical men who would not give up easily. Clara glanced behind her and then back at Jeb. I have to get away, they'll never stop chasing me. Her voice broke slightly. Please, can you help me? Jeb nodded slowly. Hop on. We'll get you out of this town before anyone knows what's happening. He dismounted smoothly, landing beside her with a grace that belied the size of his horse. Clara hesitated. She had never been on a horse like this before, especially not one so large and powerful. But there was urgency in the air, and every second she lingered made her more vulnerable. Taking a deep breath, she climbed onto the horse behind him, gripping Jeb tightly around the waist. The animal shifted beneath them, muscles coiling and relaxing as if it sensed the tension in its riders. With a flick of the reins, Jeb guided the horse forward, away from the alley and toward the wide-open plains that stretched beyond the town. Clara's chest heaved as adrenaline surged through her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she tasted a hint of freedom. As they moved farther from the town, the dust cloud of her pursuers shrinking behind them, Clara began to notice details she had never appreciated before. The plains were vast and golden, dotted with small patches of sagebrush and wildflowers swaying in the wind. The sky above was endless and bright, a brilliant blue that made her feel both tiny and infinite at the same time. She had spent her life staring at the horizon from the edge of her family's farm, but now she could finally run toward it instead of just looking. Jeb rode in silence for a while, letting her catch her breath and adjust to the speed of the horse. Eventually, he spoke again, his voice calm, almost gentle. Most folks in that town don't take kindly to a woman running away from an auction. You're lucky I came along when I did. Clara swallowed hard, not fully trusting the stranger but feeling an undeniable sense of gratitude. I don't know why my family let this happen, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I tried to escape, but they didn't stop it. I didn't even have a choice. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away, not wanting to show weakness. Jeb glanced at her but didn't say anything. Instead, he shifted slightly, adjusting his grip on the reins to make the ride smoother. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was steadying, as if both needed a moment to process everything that had happened. Clara realized how exhausted she was. Her legs ached from running, her arms trembled from gripping the gate, and her lungs felt raw from the pounding adrenaline. Yet, for the first time in hours, or maybe days, she felt a flicker of hope. She was alive. She was moving, and she was not alone. The wind whipped her hair across her face as they rode, and she clutched Jeb tighter, holding on not just for safety but for a sense of connection. There was something almost unreal about escaping the town so completely, leaving the dust, the shouting, and the fearful eyes of the townspeople far behind. Clara felt like she was stepping into a new world, one where she could decide her own fate. As they continued across the plains, Jeb finally spoke again, breaking the comfortable silence. You've got guts, you know. Most people would have frozen back there, but you ran. That takes more courage than most folks have. Clara glanced at him, unsure how to respond. She had never thought of herself as courageous. She had just been terrified. But his words stirred something inside her, a small, fragile confidence that perhaps she could face more than she had ever imagined. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes, as they navigated the rolling hills and the sparse forests that dotted the plains. Clara noticed how careful Jeb was, scanning the horizon constantly, alert for any signs of pursuit. He rode like a man who had spent a lifetime in the wild, and she realized that if anyone could help her survive this journey, it was him. Eventually, they came to a small stream, its waters sparkling in the late afternoon sun. Jeb guided the horse to the edge, letting it drink while Clara slid carefully from the saddle, her legs shaking from exhaustion. She knelt beside the water, cupping her hands to take a long drink, the cool liquid refreshing her parched throat. The sound of the stream was soothing, a soft contrast to the harsh shouts and chaos of the auction and her escape. Sitting on the bank, Clara finally allowed herself to speak more freely. "Why did you help me?" she asked, curiosity and caution mingling in her tone. Jeb watched the stream for a moment before answering. "Ain't right for folks to be treated like property. I've seen too much of that in my life. I figure everyone deserves a chance to live free." His voice was steady, carrying the weight of experience and quiet wisdom. Clara considered his words, feeling a strange comfort in them. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Clara realized that she had survived the first and hardest part of her escape. But she knew the journey wasn't over. The town might send more people after her, and the world outside was vast and unpredictable. She would need strength, courage, and perhaps even trust in the man who had saved her. For now, though, she allowed herself a moment to rest. She leaned against a tree, feeling the steady warmth of the day fading into evening. Jeb remained nearby, tending to the horse and scanning the landscape with vigilant eyes. In that quiet moment, Clara realized that she wasn't just running from danger. She was running toward a future she had never dared to imagine. A future where she could make her own choices, where she could be more than a victim of circumstance. Night fell slowly over the plains, and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky. Jeb built a small fire, its flames crackling and warming the cool air. Clara sat near it, her thoughts racing yet her body finally finding some peace. She felt a growing sense of connection to this stranger, who had appeared at the exact right moment to change the course of her life. As she drifted into a light, exhausted sleep beside the fire, Clara understood one thing: the road ahead would be difficult, full of uncertainty and challenge. But for the first time in a long time, she also felt hope. She had escaped the auction block. She had found an ally. And most importantly, she had begun to reclaim her freedom, one small step at a time. The morning sun rose slowly over the vast plains, casting long golden rays across the rolling hills. Clara woke to the gentle warmth of the fire's fading embers and the sound of birds beginning their morning song. Her body ached in ways she hadn't felt before, muscles sore from running, from riding, and from the stress of the past day, but her spirit felt lighter. She had survived. She was free, at least for now. Jeb was already awake, standing by the stream, letting his horse drink while scanning the horizon with eyes that missed nothing. Clara watched him quietly, noticing the way he moved with a steady confidence, his hands firm on the reins yet gentle with the horse. She had begun to trust him, though she still couldn't quite understand why he had intervened in the first place. There was something about him that inspired calm, even in the midst of chaos. "Morning," she said softly, her voice still hoarse from yesterday's exertions. Jeb turned toward her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Morning," he replied. "Sleep well." Clara nodded, brushing the dirt and straw from her hair. "As well as I could, I suppose. I keep thinking about yesterday, about how close I came and how you saved me." She paused, her gaze dropping to the ground. "Why did you care?" Jeb didn't answer immediately. He looked out over the plains, as if searching for the right words in the horizon itself. "Ain't right for someone to be treated like they don't have a say in their own life," he said finally. "I've seen too much of that in my time. And I figure everyone deserves a chance to make their own choices." His voice was calm, measured, carrying a quiet authority that made Clara believe him. Clara felt a mixture of relief and curiosity. She had never known anyone who acted out of pure kindness or principle in such a dangerous time. Most people she had encountered cared only for themselves or for what they could gain. Jeb was different, and that difference gave her hope. After a quick breakfast of bread and dried fruit, Jeb led the horse further into the plains. Clara held onto the saddle, adjusting her position as they moved over the uneven terrain. The wind whipped her hair into her face, and the sun warmed her back, but she didn't complain. Each mile they traveled made her feel lighter, as if the dust and fear of the auction block were being left behind. As they rode, Jeb spoke quietly, teaching Clara small things about riding, about reading the land, and about surviving in the open. "See that ridge over there," he said, pointing with a gloved hand. "If we get there by noon, we can rest on the other side. It'll give us a good view of the land and anyone who might be following. Always keep your eyes open, but don't let fear control you. Fear's what keeps most folks from seeing the truth." Clara listened intently, absorbing everything he said. She had never been trained to handle danger, to navigate a world where threats were real and constant. Yet Jeb's words were simple and clear, giving her a sense of power she hadn't felt before. She began to realize that freedom wasn't just about running away. It was about knowing how to survive, how to think, and how to act. As the hours passed, the landscape changed subtly. The flat plains gave way to small hills, and clusters of trees began to appear here and there. Jeb slowed the horse as they reached a gentle rise, pointing toward a valley below. "There," he said, "a good place to rest. Plenty of cover, water nearby, and we can see anyone coming for miles. We stay here for the day, then decide on our next move." Clara dismounted, letting the horse drink from the stream that ran through the valley. She felt the cool water on her hands and face, and for a moment she closed her eyes, letting herself simply be in the moment. She was alive. She was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time she allowed herself to hope. As they settled down near a cluster of trees, Clara finally began to speak more openly about her past. She told Jeb about her family, the farm, and the desperate choice that had led to her being put on the auction block. She spoke of the fear and shame she had felt, of the way the crowd had looked at her, and of the terror that had driven her to run. Jeb listened quietly, never interrupting, his presence steady and reassuring. "You've been through more than most folks will in a lifetime," he said finally, "but you're still standing. That says more about you than anything else." Clara looked at him, feeling a strange sense of trust and gratitude. He had not only saved her but had also given her the space to speak, to express the fear and anger she had carried inside. The afternoon passed with quiet conversation, lessons in survival, and occasional silences filled only by the sounds of nature. Clara began to notice the small details around her, the way the sunlight danced through the leaves, the smell of fresh water, the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. It was a world completely different from the dust and heat of Dry Creek, a world where danger existed but beauty did as well. As evening approached, the golden light of the setting sun bathed the valley in warm hues. Clara and Jeb prepared to make camp for the night, gathering firewood and finding a safe spot to sleep. The sky turned shades of orange and purple, the first stars beginning to appear in the twilight. Clara sat near the fire, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in days, maybe even weeks. Yet even in this calm, Clara knew the journey wasn't over. The town might send others after her. The world outside was vast, unpredictable, and often harsh. She would need courage, intelligence, and perhaps even more trust in Jeb than she had yet allowed herself. But for the first time, she also felt a sense of agency, a feeling that she could influence her fate rather than simply react to it. Night fell fully over the valley and the fire crackled warmly between them. Jeb kept watch while Clara rested, her body exhausted but her mind active, thinking through what she had learned, what she still needed to learn, and what might come next. She felt a bond growing between them, not one of romance or dependency, but one built on mutual respect, trust, and the shared goal of survival. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and restorative. Clara dreamed not of the auction block or the shouting crowds, but of the open plains, the endless sky, and the feeling of running freely across the land with Jeb by her side. In her dream, she could feel the wind in her hair, the sun on her face, and the quiet strength that came from knowing she had escaped her past and was moving toward a future of her own making. When she awoke the next morning, the sky was painted with soft pinks and blues. The world felt new, and with it came a renewed sense of determination. She was no longer just a girl who had been trapped. She was a survivor, a young woman learning the skills, wisdom, and courage needed to navigate a world that was often cruel and unforgiving. And she knew that with Jeb's help, she might not just survive, she might thrive. Together, they mounted the horse again and continued their journey across the plains. Each mile brought new challenges, new lessons, and new glimpses of the freedom Clara had been denied for so long. And with every step, every moment, she began to realize that the journey was as much about discovering herself as it was about escaping the town she had left behind. The plains stretched endlessly before Clara and Jeb, golden under the high sun and dotted with clusters of green, brush and wildflowers. Each day they traveled brought a mix of hope and caution. Clara was learning quickly how to move quietly, how to read the wind, and how to sense danger before it appeared. She was beginning to understand that freedom wasn't just about running. It was about knowing the land, the people, and oneself. As they rode toward a distant ridge, Clara felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The town of Dry Creek was far behind them now, but she could not shake the thought that her escape might have consequences. Someone might still come after her. The auctioneer, the town sheriff, or even neighbors she had known all her life could track her down. The thought made her chest tighten, but Jeb's calm presence beside her was grounding. "Don't let worry slow you," Jeb said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "You can't change what's already done. All you can do is keep moving forward and make smart choices." Clara nodded, absorbing his words. They weren't just advice. They were a reminder that she was no longer a victim. She had a choice now, and every step she took was her own. They continued riding until the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. Jeb slowed the horse as they approached a small clearing surrounded by tall trees. He dismounted first, leading the horse carefully toward a small stream. Clara followed, her legs tired but steady. She knelt to drink from the water, feeling the cool liquid refresh her body and clear her mind. "This place is good for tonight," Jeb said, scanning the area. "Plenty of cover, water, and we can see anyone coming from a distance. We'll rest here, then move again at first light." Clara nodded, grateful for the safety he had found. She was learning that survival depended not just on running fast, but on knowing where to rest, where to hide, and how to prepare for what might come next. As they settled near the fire, Clara's thoughts drifted back to the auction block, the shouting crowd, and the fear that had driven her to flee. She had left behind a life that felt impossible to return to, yet she wondered about the people still in that town. Had her family regretted their choice? Had anyone tried to stop the auction? The questions pressed on her mind, but she kept them to herself, focusing instead on the immediate safety and comfort the fire provided. Suddenly, the quiet evening was broken by the distant sound of hooves. Clara's heart leapt into her throat, and she instinctively grabbed Jeb's arm. He didn't panic. Instead, he raised a hand, signaling her to stay calm. "Relax," he whispered. "We'll see who it is first." From the ridge, they could make out a figure riding toward them. The silhouette was unmistakable, another rider, mounted and moving quickly across the plains. Clara felt a surge of fear, but also determination. She would not be captured again. Not by anyone. Jeb watched closely, assessing the rider's speed and direction. "Looks like someone from the town," he said quietly. "But don't worry, I've got you." Clara's relief was palpable, but the tension in the air reminded her that the journey was far from over. As the rider drew closer, Jeb stood, his figure imposing against the flickering light of the fire. The rider slowed slightly, raising a hand in a cautious gesture. Jeb didn't move immediately. He wanted to be sure the person wasn't a threat. Finally, the rider spoke, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Jeb, I need to speak with you about the girl from the auction. Where is she?" Clara's heart sank. She had hoped her escape would be complete, that the town's influence would end behind her. But here it was again, a reminder that her past could reach her even in the open plains. She glanced at Jeb, unsure how he would respond. He turned his gaze to her briefly, giving her a small nod, as if to say he would protect her no matter what. "I'm not giving her up," Jeb replied firmly. "She's free. No one is taking her back to that auction." The rider hesitated, his expression conflicted. Clara noticed that he was not the burly man from the auction but someone younger, perhaps a messenger or a minor official from Dry Creek. He seemed unsure how to respond to Jeb's confidence. "She doesn't belong to anyone," Jeb continued. "And I won't let her be treated like property. If anyone in your town wants her, they'll have to deal with me first." His voice was steady, unwavering. Clara felt a swell of gratitude and admiration. Jeb's courage gave her hope that she could truly stay free, that she could live life on her own terms. The rider shifted nervously in the saddle. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "The auction, it's just how things are done, but I can see that this is different. She doesn't want to go back and I can't force her. I need to report this." Jeb's gaze was sharp but controlled. "Report what? That she's alive and safe, that she has a chance at a real life." He took a step closer, his presence commanding respect. "Go back to your town. Tell them no one is coming after her, and if they try, they'll answer to me." The rider swallowed, realizing the truth in Jeb's words, and slowly nodded. Without another word, he turned his horse and rode back toward the distant town, disappearing into the horizon. Clara exhaled a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The danger had passed for now. She looked at Jeb, her eyes wide with awe and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done if you weren't here." Jeb smiled faintly. "You did most of it yourself," he said. "You ran, you survived, and you kept your head. I just made sure no one caught you. You've got more strength than you realize." Clara felt a warmth in her chest at his words. For the first time, she believed that she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As night fully settled over the valley, Clara and Jeb prepared to rest. They built a small fire, and the soft crackle of burning wood filled the air. The stars above shone brilliantly, clear and endless, offering a quiet reminder of the vast world beyond the town they had left behind. Clara sat near the fire, thinking about the journey so far and the path that still lay ahead. She had escaped one danger, but the plains were full of uncertainty. She would need courage, intelligence, and trust in herself, and in Jeb to continue forward. Jeb kept watch through the night, alert for any signs of trouble. Clara drifted in and out of sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of freedom, survival, and what her life could become. She imagined a future far from auctions, far from fear, and filled with possibilities she had never allowed herself to consider. For the first time, she felt that life might hold something more than desperation and control. When dawn approached, the sky turning pale with early light, Clara awoke to the sound of birds and the gentle rustle of the wind. The plains stretched endlessly, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer a girl trapped by circumstance. She was a survivor, ready to continue her journey into a world where she could choose her own path. And with Jeb by her side, she felt that anything was possible. The morning sun bathed the plains in soft gold as Clara and Jeb rode along a winding path between gentle hills. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of grass and wildflowers, and the distant mountains shimmered faintly in the haze of early light. Clara felt a calm she had never known before, a sense of peace that came from leaving fear and danger behind. Yet she knew the journey wasn't over. Freedom was not just about escaping. It was about finding a place to belong and learning how to stand strong in the world. As they moved, Clara glanced at Jeb riding steadily beside her. His presence was comforting, a steady anchor in the vast, unpredictable plains. She had come to trust him not just for his skill in protecting her, but for his judgment, his kindness, and his quiet understanding. She realized that survival was not just about running from danger. It was also about finding people who could help you grow, who could guide you without controlling you. "Where are we headed?" Clara asked, her voice soft but curious. Jeb glanced at her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "There's a town ahead. Not Dry Creek, not the place you ran from, but a small settlement where folks are honest and fair. We can rest, trade for supplies, and plan our next steps. You'll be safe there for now." Clara felt a flicker of hope. The thought of a new town, a new start, was exhilarating. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a life without fear, a life where she could make her own choices, speak her mind, and live freely. Her heart lifted at the possibilities. As the day progressed, the terrain became a mix of open plains and clusters of trees, offering both beauty and practical cover. Jeb guided the horse carefully, always alert to the signs of danger in the distance. Clara had learned to trust his instincts, noticing how his eyes scanned the horizon, how he listened to the wind, and how he anticipated trouble before it arrived. It was a skill she was beginning to develop herself, one that made her feel capable and empowered. By mid-afternoon, they reached the outskirts of the small settlement Jeb had mentioned. The town was quiet, its wooden buildings simple but well kept, smoke rising gently from chimneys. People moved about their daily tasks, tending to animals, fixing fences, and carrying baskets of produce. The atmosphere was calm and welcoming, a sharp contrast to the chaos of Dry Creek. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of relief and cautious optimism. Jeb led the horse to a stable at the edge of town, speaking briefly with the stable hand. Clara watched as he handled the horse with skill and care, noticing the respect he earned from everyone around him. It was a world so different from the one she had fled, where strength and character mattered more than fear and control. She began to realize that this new place could offer her the life she had dreamed of, a life where she could truly be free. Once the horse was settled, Jeb guided Clara through the town, introducing her to a few residents and pointing out useful locations. A small market, a blacksmith, and a modest inn where they could rest. Clara felt a growing sense of belonging, as if the town itself was welcoming her with open arms. For the first time in her life, she felt that she could create a future here, one built on her own choices rather than the whims of others. That evening, they found a quiet spot near the town's edge to rest. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the landscape. Clara and Jeb sat together by a small fire, the warmth of the flames comforting against the cool evening air. For a moment, neither spoke, letting the quiet of the plains and the distant sounds of the town fill the space between them. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "Jeb, I don't even know how to thank you. You saved me, not just from the auction but from losing myself entirely. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jeb shook his head gently. "You did all the hard work yourself. I just made sure no one caught you. You had the courage to run, to fight, to survive. That's what matters. You've got strength, Clara, more than you know." Clara smiled, feeling a mix of gratitude and pride. His words weren't empty praise. They reflected what she had learned about herself during this journey. She had survived the auction, escaped a town that sought to control her, and navigated the wild plains with courage and determination. She was no longer just a girl at the mercy of circumstance. She was a young woman capable of shaping her own destiny. The night passed peacefully, with stars stretching endlessly overhead. Clara slept deeply, comforted by the safety of the town and the presence of Jeb nearby. When she awoke, the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in soft pink and gold, promising a new day, a new start, and a new life. Over the next few days, Clara began to settle into the rhythm of the town. She helped at the market, learned to tend small animals, and explored the surrounding plains. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow. She was learning not just how to survive, but how to thrive, how to live fully and freely, making choices for herself rather than being forced into the decisions of others. Jeb remained a constant presence, offering guidance when needed but never imposing control. He taught her practical skills, how to navigate the land, care for horses, and recognize signs of danger. But more importantly, he encouraged her to trust her instincts, to make decisions, and to believe in her own strength. Under his mentorship, Clara began to feel confident in her abilities, empowered by the knowledge that she could face whatever challenges the future might hold. One afternoon, as they walked through the town, Clara noticed children playing near the square and women chatting while tending their gardens. The scene was simple, peaceful, and full of life. She realized that this was the life she had been seeking all along, a life of freedom, choice, and community. She felt a sense of belonging she had never known, a feeling that she could build a future filled with hope and possibility. As evening approached, Clara and Jeb returned to the edge of town, watching the sun set over the plains. The sky was a brilliant tapestry of orange, purple, and gold, reflecting the vast possibilities of the world around them. Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the safety and freedom she now enjoyed, but for the journey that had led her here. Every step, every moment of fear and courage had brought her to this point, a life she could shape on her own terms. Jeb spoke quietly, breaking the silence. "You've come a long way, Clara. The town's safe, and you've got everything you need to start over. But remember, freedom isn't just about being away from danger. It's about making choices, standing strong, and living your life fully. You've already shown you can do that." Clara nodded, feeling the weight and truth of his words. She understood now that her journey wasn't just about escaping the auction. It was about discovering her own strength, her own voice, and her own path. She had faced fear, survived danger, and embraced courage she didn't know she possessed. And now, with Jeb's guidance and her own determination, she could begin a new chapter in her life. That night, as the stars glittered overhead and the plains stretched endlessly into the distance, Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known. She was free, truly free, and the future lay before her, full of possibilities. The journey had been difficult, filled with fear and uncertainty, but it had also revealed her inner strength and resilience. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she could face them with courage and determination. In the days and weeks that followed, Clara began to build a life she could call her own. She made friends in the town, learned new skills, and explored the surrounding lands. Each day was a step toward independence, a step toward a future she had chosen rather than one forced upon her. And throughout it all, Jeb remained by her side, not as a protector in the old sense, but as a guide, a friend, and a witness to her growth. Clara often thought back to the auction block, to the fear and despair she had felt, and she realized how far she had come. She had escaped the chains of circumstance, claimed her freedom, and begun to create a life defined by choice, courage, and hope. The plains were vast and full of opportunities, and she knew that she could face whatever came next with strength and determination. As she stood on a hill overlooking the town one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long and challenging, but it had led her to this moment, a life of freedom, a life of choice, and a life where she could be truly herself. The Wild West was still harsh and unpredictable, but she no longer feared it. She had found her place, her strength, and her path forward, and for the first time she felt completely, undeniably free.